Hello, this is Mrs. Ringrose, and we are back at it again. And hopefully you learned a lot from the last lesson by finding out if a value is the solution to an equation or not, because we're going to continue to use that skill throughout this entire chapter. I want to show you how to start solving equations now, but before we do that, you're going to hear me say the words inverse and isolate a lot, and I want to make sure that you know what that means. So inverse operations are operations that undo each other. Or another word for that is cancel each other out. And today we're just going to focus on using the additive inverse. So when we see something that is positive or is being added, the inverse operation would be a minus. And in the same way, if we saw something that was a minus, to cancel that out, we would need to use a plus. So just keep that in mind as we work through today's lesson. If you've ever heard the word isolation used before, hopefully you've noticed that it means to get alone or to put someone away from everybody else. And that's really what this means with a variable. If we're going to isolate the variable, it means get the variable alone. And what this looks like is x equals. All right, there's nothing being added to x. There's nothing else being multiplied on x. It's just an x equals something equation. And then find the solutions is really what we're doing when we're asking you to solve. All right, I spent a lot of time talking about the different ways to get answers. There's evaluate, right? That means to get a value. There's simplify. That means to make it look simple. And it might not just be one number. And then solving is the big one. Solve means find a solution. Whatever is on the other side of that x equals, that's going to be your solution. All right, and here's our first example. This is how I want it to work all of our solving examples and solving practice problems for the rest of our life here. So you would be given an equation, and then the directions would say solve for x. I probably should have typed that in. And you're going to look at that problem, and you're going to think to yourself, what is happening to the x? All right? I'm going to even write that down. It's very important. And then hopefully your answer is going to be, well, there's 5 being added. Well, what can I do to cancel out a plus 5? So you're going to rewrite it. Use a different color. X plus 5. And I know that if I minus 5, then that 5 is going to go away because they're additive inverses. Equals 7, but whatever I do on one side of the equation, I also want to do on the other side of the equation, because an equation has to be equal at all times. Right, so I minus 5 from both sides. So then what happens is this is 0. So if you want, we can write x plus 0 equals whatever 7 minus 5 is. It's 2. So what I did here was I subtract 5. Then you simplified. And then x 0 plus anything is just that anything. So x equals 2. Finally, before you move on to the next problem, I want you to check your answer. All right, this is going to help you get A's on every single test. You're going to take that 2 and you're going to replace it in for x. So before my equation was x plus 5 equals 7. Now I'm going to write 2 plus 5 equals 7. And I'm going to ask myself if that's true, just like we did the last page. 2 plus 5 is 7 equals 7. Check. It's a solution. All right, so that's one very basic example. I got a couple more examples just using the additive inverse property. Okay, so the next one, I see this all the time. They see all these 3's, they just think it's 0. Well, let's really work it out and figure out what's going on. So what's happening to the x? Well, the x is being added by 3. What's going to cancel out an addition of 3? So I'm going to rewrite it, x plus 3, and I'm going to recognize that I need to subtract 3 to cancel that out. Here's the rest of my equation. And then I'm also going to subtract 3 on the other side. Alright, because you have to do it to both sides to make the equation stay balanced. So then these cancel out, and if you want to continue to write x plus 0, you can. I don't want you to forget that. That's actually a really important part of this, but I'm going to skip over it from now on. So all I have left is x equals, well, how much is negative 3 minus 3? Negative 6. So my answer is negative 6. I really should write that down there, because this is the step where I simplified. And then my final step should be to check my work. If I put that negative 6 back into my equation, I get negative 6 plus 3. Does that equal negative 3? Well, the stronger number is 6. They're different signs, so I subtract. So I get 3, but it's negative. And yes, that equals negative 3. So I checked. Alright, so again, all we're doing is we're doing the opposite of the addition to solve. Sometimes the equation is written backwards. Alright, and I know that might confuse some of you. So you can do a couple things. You can just still consider the question, what is happening to the x? So you could actually just cover up this side for a second with your hand. You don't see my hand, so that's why I have to do that. And think, what is happening to the x? Well, 7's being added, so I'm going to erase that. So I need to subtract 7 from both sides to get that x isolated. So I've got 2 minus 7 equals x plus 7, and there's that minus 7 again, because I have to do it to both sides. And then what happens is positive 7, negative 7 cancel out to 0, and I'm left with negative 5 equals x. So now my x is isolated. I've solved for it. Alright, I simplified it. And then my last step is that I should go back and check. Does 2 equal negative 5 plus 7? Well, again, they're different signs. I'm going to subtract. On this one, the bigger or stronger number is positive, so it stays positive. So, yep, I checked it. All right, awesome. All right, I know this video is kind of going beyond my 8-minute threshold I always give myself, but there's a couple that are the opposite of addition, so I want to make sure that we look at them all. It's still considered the additive inverse because we're still doing the opposite. So again, the question is, what is happening to the x? And it is being subtracted by 5. So you have to ask yourself, what is going to cancel out a minus 5? All right, on this one, I have to add 5 to both sides. So it's going to look like this, x minus 5. Now I'm going to add 5 to both sides, because that'll the minus 5 plus 5 is going to cancel out to 0. All right, but I added 5 to one side of the equation, so I have to also do it to the other side of the equation. These cancel out, and I get x equals 15. So I simplified. And then my final step should be, I should check it. If I put that 15, that's for you to write in. If I put that 15 in for x, it's going to look like 15 minus 5. 15 minus 5 is 10, so that's a check. Last one. And again, what's great about a video is if I start to pick up the pace and go too fast, you can always go ahead and pause me and rewatch me. So the original equation is x minus 4. I have to think what's going to cancel out subtraction of 4. What's the opposite of subtracting 4? And what it is I need to add 4 to both sides. So I'm going to add 4 over here to make it 0, but if I do it on one side, I also have to add 4 on the other side. So I get 16 equals, all that's left is x simplified. And then I should go back and check my work. I'm going to do it on this one, just to make sure we're on the same page because it's on the other side. 16 minus 4. 16 minus 4 is 12, so that is a check. Awesome. So hopefully this helped you, introduce you into solving using the additive inverse. Some of these I know you can do mental math on, and it might be frustrating that I'm making you go through these steps. But you really do need to show me the work, because once we get into equations with more letters or decimals or fractions, you need to have a way to always get the right answer. So I hope this helped you, and I'll see you next time when we do the multiplicative inverse. See ya.